You know, I have a list like this along, but we just don't.
Good evening. I'd like to call the school committee meeting to order on Wednesday, January 19th at 7 o'clock. Just a friendly reminding that the listing of matters of those reasonably anticipated by the chair may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed, in fact, will be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion in the extent of permitted by law. The Douglas Public School offers a diverse learning experience to meet the academic, social, physical, and emotional needs of all students. We provide a safe, supportive, and challenging learning environment in which students may achieve academic success and personal growth. Discussions are made in the best interest of our students. Next, I'd like to do Pledge of Allegiance, please. Please rise and stand. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to call our student representatives to come up and talk to us, Adriana Acosta and Catalina Acosta. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Adriana. Hello, I'm Adriana Acosta, and I'm here with my sister Catalina Acosta. We are part of the Middle School Student Council, and we are here to update you on what's been happening around the middle school. Basketball is in full swing, with the boys and girls teams having played a few games so far. The girls just got their first win against Hopedale on January the 11th. Practice remains 5 days a week, and COVID hasn't reached the two teams too much.
Cheer update. The cheer team has cheered on their first game for the boys and girls team at home and did a great job spreading school spirit. They have been practicing multiple times per week, and they are prepared for more games.
The Student Council will be hosting a concession stand at the home basketball games to raise money for the end of the year activities for the school.
Before winter break, the Student Council planned the Winter Olympics, which was very successful. All 3 grades had a lot of fun while participating in a STEM activity, a dodgeball competition, and a look-it trivia challenge. Then, the closing ceremonies in the auditorium was a fun way to end the day, with medals going to winning countries.
In math, the 8th grade are learning about functions and linear lines on a graph. We had a quiz last week on Monday and a test the week before. In ELA, we are finishing up our narrative writing pieces, which turned out really well. The civics class is very fun, and we are making a book on the Constitution and learning about the preamble and its goals. In science, we started to learn about tornadoes and thunderstorms. We have a test on cloud types a week ago, and the kids did great. In Spanish, we are starting to learn about families, and we're making a family tree soon. In 7th grade, they are learning about proportions and have just finished up inequalities, and in literature are reading and writing about the Christmas Carol. In geography, China, Japan, and Korea are being taught, and we just started to add Australia. In science, they are learning about the formation of volcanoes and how they were first found.
In 6th grade, in geography, we are learning about Mesopotamia. We are also working very hard in learning the new subject of decimals in math. In science, we are learned about fossil. In writing class, we have been having fun with making up skits that are based off of sentence types. We have had some great students this month for the Student of the Month, and we wanted to recognize them. The students were down to the cafeteria where they enjoyed a nice meal with their family.
Quarter 2 is ending this Friday at the middle schools. A week is being provided in order to help students who have been absent as an opportunity to complete missed work. Report cards will be issued on Monday the 31st.
Thank you for having us. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move to public comment and communication. The school board welcomes public comment on items within the scope of the school committee responsibilities. Public comment agenda items is reserved for this purpose. Is there anyone online?
Nope.
Seeing that there is none, I'm going to close public comment and go to any old business that we need to discuss.
Not at this time.
Moving on to new business and to the superintendent's report, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start with COVID update. I want to start off by just thanking everyone for the help and cooperation, obviously throughout this entire pandemic, but most recently with the recent surge we've seen as a result of not only the holiday season, but the Omicron spike. Just when you didn't think things could get crazier and more problematic, they did. But a huge thank you to our nurses, members of our leadership team, teachers, paraprofessionals, all faculty and staff. They absolutely stepped it up with coverage issues. The goal has always been to stay open, and we had some staff absences, we've had student absences as a result of this, but the staff has been wonderful in covering for each other and making sure that classes are covered. Just as people know, we don't have a remote option, and any days that we do miss as a result of having to close for COVID would have to be made up at the end of the school year. So the goal is to stay open as much as possible. Have this discussion with a few people. I know people realize it, but I also think it's important to reiterate that when we close schools, and we do it sometimes for snow reasons, but when we close schools is a place where many of our kids get their only meals of the day. Schools are a place where we offer a warm, nurturing, welcoming environment for kids where they feel safe and secure. When we remove that, it's difficult for some of our student population. So I always grapple with closing school, even for snow, remembering that we have a population of our students who come here to be fed, to be nurtured, to receive some of their services, to interact with peers, to interact with adults, that this is the best part of their day and the safest part of their day. So removing that always bothers me. So I take that into consideration when doing snow days. But even with these COVID days, I know it's been problematic, but we were able to hopefully make it through, and we wanted to keep it open. But again, thank you to the staff who's been wonderful in helping out. Confirmed cases, we've seen that downward trend over the past 10 days. If you look at the positivity rating over the past 7 days, it's been going down off the MassGov website. Now, I do understand that those are only tests that people go out and take, that doesn't take into consideration the home tests, which a lot more people are doing, but we have seen that downward trend over in cases. If you follow anything of the wastewater plant up at Deer Island, over the past 10 days, they've also seen a decrease in the number of cases. So we're trending in the right direction, and there's some optimism. It's going to take a little bit of while before we get back to pre-Thanksgiving numbers, but I'm optimistic that we're trending in the right direction. Our staff numbers of people being positive have lowered. Our number of student absences have also decreased in the past 5-6 days, so we're going in the right direction, which is great. Yesterday, DESE announced a new program for schools, and just want to spend some time talking about it. We're seriously considering it. I want to continue to do my due diligence over the next few days before we officially launch it. Still some things we need to check out, but what they're looking to do is they're looking to eliminate the test and stay program in schools, and they're looking to eliminate contact tracing. And what they found through their research is that the individual positivity rate in schools of kids and adults who are in the pool testing is far less than the state positivity rating. As of January 9th, there were slightly over 500,000 test and state cases that were conducted, and there was slightly less than 500,000 that were negative. So 98.6% of the test and state cases that were done from the beginning of the year were all negative. So what that leads us to believe, and the state to believe, is that the positivity rating in test and state of individuals identified as close contacts were very unlikely to get COVID. So we're doing all this work in test and stay and identifying close contacts, and there's about a 1 to 2% of the population who's actually getting COVID as a result of being identified as a close contact. So they're shifting the focus, and instead of spending the hours upon hours and hours of time identifying close contacts and doing test and stay, they want to shift the focus to contacting the symptomatic students and individuals that are in school and getting them the treatment that they need. So it's changing that focus. We'd still continue with symptomatic in-school testing. So if you're in school and you become symptomatic, you'd come down to the office. We'd continue with the pool testing. And what faculty and staff would have the ability to do if they opted into it was to receive every other week a free test kit to take home. That test kit would come with 2 tests. So you get a test for every week we'd pick up the kit every other week. The thinking of the Department of Education, who did this in conjunction with the Department of Public Health, is that every week people would have access to in-school 2 free tests, the pool testing and then the test kit that you would take home. And what they're recommending is that you take the test 3 or 4 days after you have the pool testing. So we typically do our pool testing on Wednesdays. We get the results Thursday or Friday. They're recommending that the individual take the at-home test on Sunday. So every 3 or 4 days, you have the ability to have access to whether or not you've tested positive or negative. This is a conversation we started as a leadership team, and we met with the nurses about 2 weeks ago, and we've been considering making this move. DESE's now made it official that we can do it if we launch into the program, and we're going to continue doing our due diligence and make a decision probably in the next 2 to 3 days as to whether or not we do it. They did a webinar today at 1 o'clock. I had a schedule conflict. I'm going to watch the webinar tomorrow and see what information they provided, but this is a move in the right direction for a lot of reasons. Answer any questions people might have about COVID.
I think we're in COVID overload.
We are in COVID overload.
So, I mean,
Excellent. All right, next on the agenda, I'm going to have the principals come up, and I've asked them to cover a couple of topics as a review. We've talked about common planning time. The middle school implemented common planning time. Mr. Romano's done a lot of work. The primary and the elementary school do have common planning time. I'd like to give the committee an update as to what actually happens during that structured time. I want to give everyone an update on our SEL programs and what's going on inside each of the buildings. We're going to talk a little bit about the remediation programs. We implemented that using Sr2 money at the beginning of the year to help mitigate those gaps of students that missed time last year and also time this year as a result of being out. We're going to talk about that. And then the other 2 things that I've asked them to add today is a brief overview of our Professional Development Day on Friday, which was awesome, and then touch briefly on, we've seen a lot of kids out because of COVID. A little bit at the beginning of the year, but more so in the past 2 to 3 weeks. So they're going to talk a little bit about how work is sent home, the thinking behind it, and what we have in place when kids can't come to school as a result of being COVID positive. We will start today with Mr. Romano. The 10-minute walk to the podium.
Hello. So we implemented common planning time starting about 4 years ago, basically for the 5 core academic departments: English, Math, Science, History, and Spanish. So they have the opportunity to meet every day. They all have the same prep period. I attend 1 per month where I've kind of selected the topic and it's done with feedback from them. I do end up missing them. I probably missed 1 per department so far this year, just as things come up. But the topics are generally curriculum. I went around at the beginning of the year to talk about social emotional needs and executive functioning skill, those sort of academic skills like organization and time management, just to find out what they felt kids were most in need of for us to address in things like intervention or the after-school homework club. We've also done data review, especially MCAS data review, in the meetings that I've attended. They do other things like they plan budget, they plan assessments. We're working on getting them more adept at collaborative protocols that they can do for looking at student work or giving feedback to each other on assignments and things like that. I've done some stuff like that with them as well. And that's generally how we use our common planning time. It's pretty productive. You know, I think giving teachers that collaborative time can really empower them to take the best ideas from everybody in the department and make better instruction, better assessment, better products for kids to use. So that's how we've used our common planning. Do you want me to just go through all the topics?
Sure.
All right. Cindy's timing me, so. In terms of social emotional learning, we are following a tiered system, the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 that is pretty typical in Massachusetts schools. Tier 1, which is general for everybody, is our advisory program. And that is tailored to different things for different grades. So for seniors, it really is on that transition out. We try to gear it around the college process. It includes things like having graduates come back to talk to students, lessons on Naviance, collecting up their letters of recommendation, doing the Common App, things like that. When you get down to freshmen, it's more thinking about the future, sort of trying to brainstorm what careers they might be interested in. For our Tier 2, it's more small group, and these are things that are recommended through like the student support team or through the counseling department. And there's small groups that focus on things like managing anxiety, managing anger, dealing with frustration. And it'll be a small group run by Lindsay Ryan, who is the school adjustment counselor. And she runs their 6 to 10 week seminars, I guess you'd call them, of those students coming out and working on building up those skills. And then for our Tier 3, which is the individual level, the more intensive need, we do have counseling that's done by Jess Hurley, the school psychologist, Lindsay Ryan again, and then Jill Carpenter and Kristen O'Brien have individual caseloads of kids that they work with for those that need that individual counseling. We also have family continuity comes in twice per week. They send a counselor who works with a caseload of students on Tuesdays and Fridays and gives them school-based counseling. So I'm pretty pleased with our SEL support. We also have several teachers who are working on integrating social emotional learning and executive functioning instruction into the curriculum. It's the topic that I'm working on for grad school. And that, we'll see how that's worked out. The kids do their posts, they do some surveys to see how they're doing in a couple weeks. And in terms of our academic tiers and what we do for students who are falling behind academically, for Tier 1, which again is that universal, I think we've made some pretty great strides in continuing to expand the co-teaching. It's in every grade, it's in all the core subjects, and I think that those relationships have really become strengthened as general education teachers have figured out what to do with this extra adult in the room, and those special ed teachers have figured out how to integrate themselves into those classrooms, which isn't easy. It's very hard for that gen ed teacher to give up control of their classroom and allow a special ed teacher to help run the show. For our Tier 2, which again is that small group, I think we tend to do that through our intervention blocks that we run twice a week, which is also where kids can go for their individual help. And another really great success we've had is we use some of the COVID grant money, the Sr3 grant money. I say that right?
Yes.
Oh, ESER too.
Some of that money we
ESER2.
use to do an after-school program that Ashton Henry does, or Ashton Martian, I'm terrible with married names, that she does up in the library twice a week. And that's been a pretty big success. Not all the kids are there because they're volunteering. They're there because a student might be struggling academically, and myself or Jill or Kristen will call them up and say, hey, you know, we have this thing after school, and now the kid stays, the student gets the help that they need, and so that's been a pretty great success. I think we're looking at actually bringing in some National Honor Society kids to help in there as tutors so that Ashton isn't stretched too thin by that. And then, you know, for us, when kids are absent, I think we kind of treat it the same way we would if they had like mono. It's hard to deliver kind of that personalized instruction to kids, but I think the staff has been really flexible about kind of cutting it down to the essentials. So, you know, if there were 30 assignments or 30 problems on a homework assignment, I think they're really striving to say like, okay, if you do these 12, I know that you've done the practice, I know that you've done what you need to do. And then things like that homework club and the intervention blocks have helped with that as well. Kids can go and seek out the teacher that they need to get some extra help from or catch up on in the intervention blocks. And Ashton's pretty great with helping them with anything. So that's where we are.
A PD day on Friday.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, PD day on Friday. I thought we had a pretty good day. We had Dr. Christina Whittlesley, who is a teacher in Chelmsford, came in. She's a music teacher. And she came in to work with our staff on how you support LGBTQIA students in the classroom. So looking at how to set a positive classroom environment, a safe, supportive classroom environment for students, dealing with discriminatory language, how you address it, how you make, you know, teachable moments out of it when you need to, how you make disciplinary moments out of it when you need to, kind of where you find that difference. And then reducing gender bias in the curriculum. There was a big chunk of it that was teachers working collaboratively, and she and I walked around the school, and there were some pretty great conversations happening among teachers. And she said that she was pretty impressed with the dedication that the staff has shown towards this, that they're not just putting that sticker that this is a safe place on the window of their door, that they're making actual proactive steps to try to make kids feel safe. So there's some great conversations that were happening around it with like how we can have more representative literature in the English department, how we can address classroom management and safety in the special ed department discussion. She heard some great stuff that the history department was doing as far as integrating topics into the curriculum. So she was a pretty great speaker for that work. So it was a good day. All right.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to know, and I'm curious with the other principals as well, how are teachers feeling about the common planning time? Are they finding it, really helpful and beneficial and feeling like they're able to do a lot more in the classroom? Or
So I don't know yet. So those common planning time requires some training for the staff. You can't just say, here's all this time, go do great things. So you do have to work on the tuning protocols with them, and what that comes down to is working with the department chairs on making that time more worthwhile. So I think it varies a little bit I think all of them enjoyed having the time.
Okay.
I think like the English department makes great use out of it. So I would say that they find it definitely beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a work in progress to make it something that is done where that department chair is leading the department through these discussions when I'm not there too.
Mm-hmm.
Leading them through these protocols and things like that to make it worthwhile. I would say that they find it rewarding to be able to collaborate and share ideas with staff members. It's still figuring out how to best use that time. I think we're all still working on it, but it's definitely been an advantage to have it.
Great. And then I have one more question too, is with all the COVID absence, I know that we looked at the numbers of where we were according to the state standards, and we were, like all schools were lower than we had hoped, but do you feel like we're on the track to making headway, even with all of the COVID absences?
Making headway as far as like academic progress?
With bringing those numbers up, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot more stable year than it was last year. Students are here more. I think very few students really thrived in the remote environment. And so I think having everybody back here, having them here every day, having them the day is essentially normal except we have mask breaks and we're wearing masks in classroom. Other than that, the day is mostly normal. So I think that the academic progress that students are making is far better than it was last year. So. Okay.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Mr. O'Brien.
It's tough when I don't have like Cindy to go first.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The middle school has a schedule now, excuse me. Teachers have common planning time every day. The schedule is very effective in having them work. A little different than a high school is teachers are used to working in the grade level teams, where at the high school that's a little more cumbersome. So all the teachers, including the special education teacher, meets for that period of time during the day. During that time, they can either reach out, they have a lot of Zoom meetings with parents, so they have all the teachers right there. I think parents really appreciate that, so they can talk to all the children's teachers in that same time during the day. That it's a very productive time. During those meetings, too, they go over the curriculum, the academics, what students are missing, what do they need. The school adjustment counselor pops in frequently to see what issues are there that we can head off before it gets too bad. And I will pop in from time to time. One of my favorite parts is just walking into those meetings and hearing the conversations that they're having about teaching and learning and how to support the students at the middle school. We do have to do a little better job with looking at the data and going through that, but as our first year, I think we're ahead of where I thought we'd be at this point, going to that common planning time. But I do know the teachers really appreciate that time. They get a lot of work done, and it's well worth the investment of time. SEL, we have an SEL block first thing in the morning, and what we found was that it wasn't enough time to get into real conversations about it. Teachers are great at coming up with the curriculum and adjusting it to the needs of the students, of what's coming up there. And the students, I think what they've noticed being outside from school for COVID, they like to talk, and they want to lead the conversation, and they want to be listened to. So just having that time period where the teachers can listen to the students, as opposed to teaching and having those conversations about the social emotional learning, very productive. But we found out that the time was not lengthy enough. So each grade level has either reading or writing across the curriculum. So on days where it falls in our long block, which is our lunch block, we adjusted that to go through SEL topics more in depth. When you look at the learning now compared to last year, definitely from just my experience in schools, not just here in Douglas, a lot tighter this year than it was last year on how things are going. But that being said, the 8th grade students haven't had a normal year of middle school since they've been in the school. And the mental health aspect is still frightening, especially with students of this age. I think last count, 14 visits to emergency mental health from the school, and a lot of that is suicide ideation and self-harm, and that's very concerning. And we have a school adjustment counselor that worked with it, and we have family continuity program coming in, but that's an area of need these students have, which is, we probably could have predicted that 3 years ago when we thought it would just be 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then as it dragged on. So that's a serious concern that we have in following up with the parents, the families, and the teachers on how to address those concerns. That goes back to our common planning time, where it's great to have those conversations. A lot of that information you don't want to share in an email. You can sit down and, depending on the family's comfort level dealing with the students, you have that brief conversation. It might just be something as simple, kids having a hard time, or it can be more in depth. They want to share, there was an active suicide attempt, and families are struggling right now, and what can we do to support the family? So just having those conversations are really important. And it is a great concern that we have, that we see. Definitely a spike this year. Remediation Program, we have the Academic Development Center that currently right now has 38 kids scheduled into it. It's ran by Stephanie Campbell, one of our ABAs. And she has 4 classroom teachers that circulate in and out to assist them as well. Those students, they can flex in and flex out of that time. So for example, if a student was out with COVID and felt fine, just COVID positive, they're able to keep up on that work. If the student was out really sick with COVID, they couldn't have time to, they weren't even feeling well enough to read their emails. So that student would be in there for a couple extra days, or even just, all right, instead of some of your elective classes, we're going to go there and catch you up on time. So it's very flexible to make sure that we fulfill the students' needs that they have in that learning. We also have our Flex Center, some tutoring going on right now with some health issues. And just anything we can do to keep the kids up to spot. We're not back to a normal school year by any stretch, but definitely a much better place, I think, than we were last year. For our PD day, we did had all the teachers identify their power standards, so where the kids were right now, what do they need to know, and what do we have to do to get them to next year. And it was nice because we had the 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade teachers all working together to identify, here are the needs, here's what we found missing, how do we make up that time, and then to map out the next 6 weeks of curriculum to see where they were going and follow up with that. We do have our MWEA progress report testing coming up in January, so that will give us a nice formative assessment of where the students are at this time. Open to any questions.
Is there any feedback yet on how the vertical meetings are working?
For a couple different reasons, we haven't been able to launch that this year.
Okay. Okay.
But it was nice to have that PD time, so the 7th graders talk to the 6th, 8th to the 7th, to see what those needs are. We'll be moving forward, working with the other schools, be very beneficial. We do have some gaps we got to fill in, absolutely, especially with our 8th graders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bell?
Thank you.
Good evening. All right, so let's start with common planning time at the elementary school. So last year we got away from common planning time because of the funky schedules and everything we had because of COVID, but this year we've been able to get it back in our regular rotation. So each day one grade has common planning time, so every 4 days they get a 45-minute chunk of time at the end of the day where they get together. The priorities during that time is to look at student data, and so like this week, they just did their mid-year testing last week. They're looking at the data, they're getting the parent reports ready to go home on Friday, and they're talking to our Title I teachers about making any changes to student grouping with who gets services and who doesn't, and then also adjusting their groups within their classrooms. So just the kids they meet with on a day-to-day basis. So that's one of the things they do. They also talk about assessment and how they're, seeing where kids are at. So if they're in a math unit on fractions, they're making sure that they're giving common assessments so that what one teacher is giving is similar to what the other 3 teachers are giving, so that there's continuity within the grade. And then after they do that, they're supposed to be talking about how the kids did, which kids struggled, and how they're going to fill the gaps for those kids that didn't make the progress they needed to make. So it's a lot of data talk that happens, and they also plan things like field trips and things like that. It's a chance for them to get together as a team and make sure they're all on the same page. It's awesome because our special ed teacher for the grade's also able to be there, so they're able to just make sure everybody's on the same page with what instruction's looking like. With the remediation piece, we added 2 new para positions this year, which has allowed us to have 1 dedicated Title I paraprofessional at each grade. So we have 1 second, third, and fourth. Our 5th grade one isn't technically Title I because we only do Title I up to 4th grade, but we utilize the 5th grade one in essentially the same way, where their primary focus is to make sure that we're able to do small groups within the classroom. So our 5th grade numbers this year were about 28, 29 kids in a class. So having the extra adult to help either monitor students so the teachers point a small group or vice versa has been huge this year, and it's allowed us to really target instruction with kids at those grade levels. 4th and 5th grade were the most impacted by this change, just because in the past we had 2 people floating between 3 grades, and anytime people are going between grades, then we have to schedule it, and it really limits how we're able to support kids. This has allowed us to provide support. You read all throughout the day. It's not just during reading time that you're reading. And so it's allowed us to provide extra support to kids, even during science and social studies and those other times during the day. So that's been fantastic. We gave our mid-year benchmarks last week, like I said, and Ms. Osha and I are going to report our data at the next school committee meeting on February 2nd. So we'll go more in depth into that. But that's going to give us a good gauge of kind of where we are for the year, and to see, we started off with some significant gaps, especially in math, and what kind of progress have we made. I can say from what I've seen in the classroom, this is my 4th year in Douglas, and the instruction I'm seeing is probably the strongest instruction I've seen in the 4 years I've been here. Our teachers have made some great strides, especially with the small group piece, and I think that's where in the past we've seen the kids that get it have moved on, but the kids that haven't got it, we've kind of left behind a little bit, and I think this year we're doing a much better job of keeping those kids caught up and filling those holes. So that's exciting. As far as SEL goes, the teachers are continuing to hold morning meetings and use closed gap for that daily check-in. While Ms. Blessing was on maternity leave, that fell to me to kind of look at those check-ins, and I didn't do the greatest job with that because there was a lot of things to manage. But now that she's back, any kid that checks in as needing to talk to somebody throughout the day, she's awesome about going up and checking in with those kids, and just a lot of times it's the same kids that are doing that each day, but those are the kids that are saying, I need a little extra love and support from the people at the school. So it's awesome that she's able to do that, and it's been a great system for us. It also allows us to track data, so that when we see kids that are continually checking in, we can say or all of a sudden we see it a bunch, or those types of things. So there's great data we can pull from that allows us to make sure that those kids are feeling supported. We hold our community meetings every month. The last 2 months, because of either a snow day or other events happening at the school, we haven't been able to have that, but we're scheduled to have our next one in February, and we're excited to get the kids together again. We'll have to see what the weather looks like. We've been doing them outside, but we need to get the school community together. I feel very strongly that that's a time for us to just work on things as a whole school. And so that's another way that we kind of support those types of things. In February, we're going to have a kindness month. Ms. Blessing and I are meeting tomorrow to plan out some details about what that's going to look like. Last year, the kids were able to recognize other people with hearts that we put up throughout the windows by the cafeteria to just say kind things that were happening around the building. It's just a way to put that emphasis on that kindness piece and a reminder and just being very forward about it's important that we have a kind school and kind kids. So we'll be doing that. And in our 1st and 5th grade buddies has been an awesome program this year. And it is SEL, it's a mentoring, there's a lot of different pieces with that, but we've been meeting monthly. They've read on the track together, they've done math games in the gym, they did thank you cards for staff, and is it next week? I think it's next week we're meeting.
28th.
And the 1st grade teachers have planned a STEM activity they're going to do with the 5th graders. So that's just another way to make kids want to come to school and be excited about school, and it builds those connections, and it builds excitement with the older kids that they're working, they get to mentor some other kids, and so it's just another way to build that school is a safe and fun place for kids to be. Let's see, the PD Day recap. We had a discussion on equity that we started off with. It was awesome with staff talking about ways that our school is equitable right now in areas that maybe it's not as equitable as it should be, and how are we going to continue to work in the right direction with that. And there's a lot of different reasons for those things that aren't equitable, why they're not equitable, whether it's staffing or money, but a lot of it we do have control over within just our regular classrooms. And so it was a neat discussion we had there. We also had an ST math training, just giving another overview of looking at the reports that you can run and looking at your data and being able to see, showing the teachers different ways they can check and see if kids are making the progress like they should. And then the teachers had some time to look at their mid-year assessment data, not a ton of time, and that's why they're doing it more during their common planning time. And then the best part of the day was the afternoon was all a math professional development. It was boxcars and one-eyed jacks that Cindy had used, I think, 2 other times in the past couple of years. But they came out, they had, our teachers had a Zoom session for an hour, and they had an hour and a half in-person session working on just doing hands-on math games with kids. And they gave us all kinds of ideas, a whole packet full of, each page is a different game you can play with kids working on different concepts. We had the kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers doing one session, and then 3rd through 5th doing another session, so that it could be tailored to the content that they use at those grades. But it's amazing what you can do with dice and cards, and they probably have 1,000 ideas of different things they can do with dice and cards now. And so I'm a strong believer that for kids to learn math, especially those ones that struggle more with those concepts, the more you can make it hands-on and fun and engaging, the more likely it is that it's going to stick, and you don't have to reteach it 20 times. And so I thought that was really beneficial for our teachers. They're putting an order together that PTO is helping support for all the different materials. I think Cindy has some samples of what the materials look like that she'll bring up. But it was, I loved the day. I learned some stuff. It's been a while since I've had some math professional development. I thought it was fascinating, and I think the teachers were highly engaged in it also. And then the other question was, what are we doing for kids when they're out of school? We've had a lot of kids out, and everybody's kind of dealing with this situation differently. Some kids are down for the count and aren't able to do any work. Other parents are like, my kid's out for 5 days, they need work to do, and let's keep it going. And so a lot of it has been on an individual basis. They reach out to the teacher and say, my kid's out, and they've worked with them. We've put packets together, those types of things. Kind of like before COVID, if a kid was out for multiple days for an absence, we'd work with them to kind of make sure they stayed as caught up as they can. But a lot of it's done when they come back to school. The teachers prioritize these 4 or 5 things are the most important things. Let's make sure they make that up. And then, these other 4 or 5 things maybe weren't as important, and we're just going to let it slide. And so we're kind of managing that on a kid-by-kid basis, but we're also making sure that if they miss content, we're making that content up. The great thing about elementary curriculum is a lot of it spirals. So if they're seeing, decimals in math, they're going to see decimals 3 or 4 more times throughout the year. And so it's not like it's their one opportunity, they've missed it. We're going to keep finding those opportunities. So I think that's everything. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a question. So in terms of like the COVID time, are there things that are kids able to take, is there a possibility to have Chromebooks at home during those times? So
we haven't sent the Chromebooks home just because, when we sent them home with everybody, we had a good collection rate. When it's been because of sickness, now that it's not like a planned thing, we've had a much harder time getting all the materials back we're supposed to get back. And so we haven't been sending the Chromebooks home. We talked to admin today about some possibilities for what are some, with ST Math, kids can still do ST Math, and that's something that you could spend 2 hours on it a day, and it's not going to hurt the kids. If anything, it's just more practice. And so making sure that parents have the resources to access that from home, so I'm going to work on putting that in the blog on Friday, so that parents know if your kid is home, here are some things that they can do when they're home, in addition to maybe what the packet is that's coming home also, so that you can keep that, trying to keep that school routine going as much as you can. I get it, it's important, so.
I know it's chock full of like some really great apps that
Yep.
kids can access.
So the kids can still access their ClassLink from home, they just don't have a device to do it. And so that's where I think we haven't just sent the device home, because a lot of families have those devices at home. I think we're to the point where we probably need to start sending the devices home with the number of absences that some of our kids are having. But we want to try to not send it home if we can, just to protect the resources we have to.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big help though, if there's a list of like directing parents, okay, go to these apps. I
Yep.
know there's like a lot there, so.
Yep, there is. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you.
It's you.
I know, you saved the best for last. This is what happens when I have this crew. They're a rough crowd. So, all right, well, it seems like it's been a while since we've been here, so I have a lot to tell you. So, I added a few things, I hope you don't mind. Common planning time. Honestly, this year's been a real challenge for us because of coverage. So for common planning time in our building, I have to pull a paraprofessional from, say, kindergarten to cover for first grade so that we get our common planning time in. And with the absences being what they have been, it's been tough. So we have had them, but not as consistent as I would like. So we've got to get back on track as soon as everything settles down a little bit. The good thing is that the teachers have a common prep time. So even though we're not doing a common planning, per se, with me in the conference room, they are still meeting on their own during their prep time and kind of covering some of the same things. So typically during common planning, we'd be looking at the curriculum, we'd be saying things, where are we? Are we behind? Are we ahead? Where are we compared to like a pre-COVID year? Where are our weaknesses? What are you seeing for strengths? What should we adjust, pretty much? Where are the gaps? K-SED and grade 1 social skills are the number one gap in the weakness that we're seeing. Kids still don't understand, taking turns and, having patience or playing. And they said it's amazing to watch kids in indoor recess because they don't know how to play with each other. Fine motor skills in kindergarten is a big weakness. And in grade 1, they said handwriting. They're also looking at data. We did the STAR assessment only once. We're scheduled to do the mid-year next week, so we'll have those to look at. We can look at and run ST Math reports. And then, of course, they're planning their own grade 1 events, like the grade 1 buddy system. What are they going to do for that? Things like that. So that's what happens during common planning time. Social emotional learning, we do the same. We start with a morning meeting every day in every classroom. They're up and they're moving, they're standing around the room, and it could be a greeting, it could be, say hello to everybody like a penguin because it's Penguin Awareness Week. So it's just all of that kind of thing, getting the kids to know each other's names. They don't even know their names. Who's that? I don't know. So, they're working on all of those things. Mrs. Purvis, our adjustment counselor, has been pulling lunch buddies. So just a couple friends that don't seem to mix well with other, and they're having trouble making friends, so she pulls them on the side, and again, teaching them those social skills, having lunch with her in her office. She also goes into the classroom as much as possible, usually once a week into every classroom, and she does a whole lesson with the class while the teacher is there. So it might be on being kind, or it might be on it's okay to be different. So she reads the story, they do a follow-up activity, the teacher hears it, then can reinforce it every day with the kids. So that works really well, and she loves doing it too. She gets to know everyone in the school and, they make that connection with her. The week of the 24th, we are having a Kindness Spirit Week, and so every day is a certain color for a certain topic. So Monday was green for gratitude, and then there's a challenge that goes with it. Say thank you to 3 or more people today. And then one day it might be yellow or blue. Friday is red for self-love. Think of something you did well this week and give yourself a pat on the back. So we're putting that in the week of the 24th. Our remediation program, with that extra paraprofessional, we've been able to assist at least 5 to 10 additional students in the same model that we use the paraprofessional in Title I. So the paraprofessional might push into 2 classes in grade 1 or 2 classes in kindergarten. Now we've got that other person that can push into the other 2. So you're hitting that next tier of kids that didn't qualify for Title I services. And it's very flexible. So the teacher might say, can you pull these 2 and go work on letter sounds? Or can you pull these 2 and go work on your facts, your math facts? So they can change those groups every day if they want to. So it's always something that they can take that small group and that quick hit. In the morning, they start out really quick, both of the paraprofessionals for Title I. One's in one room, one's in another, and they're doing those high-frequency sight words, you know, what are the words? They're showing them the cards, what are the words? And just drill, drill, drill with them. And it's a matter of 5 or 10 minutes. So it works. Let's see. Work for kids at home. Typically, if the parents are asking, we're sending home a packet, and that's what we've had most often asked. Some parents haven't asked, but if they do, it's more send home the materials, the same lessons that they're doing during the day, and we do that. Every teacher has a Google Classroom set up, and the parents should know that it's there. They've sent it out to everybody, and every week, everything's on there of what they're doing and things that they could be doing. So it could be a sight word drill using boom cards. That's something, new. It could be, again, it could be some math drills. It could be some games that they can do. So it's all posted in their Google Classroom. We have not sent iPads home unless it's a request, and then they could do their ST Math, there's Mystery Science, there's Learning A to Z, which used to be called Spelling City, and the kids like that one, and that's a fun one. On our PD day, pretty much we did the same thing that Mr. Bell did. We started with an equity discussion with the whole staff in the cafeteria, and they really got to talk it out, It's nice to be able to just say it, but what are you doing in your classroom that's equitable? And what do you think is a school or in the classes that is not so equitable? And so it was nice, and the paras were included, and they felt like they're part of, the whole program and not just a separate group. Then we had the ST Math training, and that was looking at the data. And the boxcars and one-eyed jacks, we got a deal on that one because even though it was pricey to have them come, it was the same presenter I've had before. They offered the virtual part of it, that 1 hour, that was free. So we lucked out with an extra $1,000 for free. So what they are is all hands-on, all right? These are the shakers. So there's a whole book of games just on shakers. They even provided us with a playlist of music with all the shake, shake, shake songs that you have. You can do so much with just this one little shaker. You can do odd, even. You can do, preschool loves them. They can just do number recognition. You can take the middle one out and you can do place value with it, with tens and ones and hundreds, and you can make 3-digit numbers. You can do addition, subtraction. You can put different colored dice in here. They love them. Even the teachers love them. They sat down at the table, they have this whole mesh bag of goodies, and the teachers were like little kids. Oh my God, look at this dice. This one's got a dice inside the dice, and it was hysterical to watch them, but they had fun. And that's what kids will do too. Kids will have fun with the math. So we've had them before a few years back, so we have a lot of the materials, but there's always something that they found that, oh, we could use those. Different kinds of number lines that they could, she just has so many ideas. I mean, they were doing them on Tuesday when I walked in the building. She had an idea with red Solo cups. Just put them in a 10 frame, and it's very visual with the red cups, little red cups. Preschool's already doing that on Tuesday morning. So that's, well worth the money spent. Yep. So it was great. And to follow up on that, we are having a virtual family math night with the same company, Boxcars and One-Eyed Jacks. It's going to be funded through our PTO. So it'll be for pre-K to 2, 6 o'clock to 6:50, and then 3 to 5 will be 6:55 to 7:45. We'll be sending home a flyer. They have to register for it. They'll get the Zoom link from the registration. And then all they need is, 6 regular dice and a deck of cards. And they'll have some fun games to play with parents at home. And again, practice those skills at home. So I'm looking forward to that. That sounds like a lot of fun. And it's going to be paid for through our PTO, so it's even better. John already talked about the grade 1 and the grade 5. The activity this month is going to be a STEM theme. I haven't even heard what grade 1 has cooked up yet. I think it's a building kind of a challenge to see which group can build something and be engineers for the day. So that should be a lot of fun. And our preschool open house is on Tuesday, February 1st. So we're already working on our registrations for 2022, 2023. That's all I have. Any questions?
Covered a lot. Thank you so much, Ms. Sosa, as always.
Thanks.
I'd have to just say that, the start of this year, there was like a huge feat, I think, ahead of us and as a district. And I feel like so much has already started happening, and, I'm eager to see the data that has been looked at, but, it's evident that there's a lot of stuff and a lot of thinking going on in every school, so I'm thrilled to hear that, so.
I was going to say, we spend a lot of time talking about COVID, and unfortunately, a lot of my newsletters are COVID updates, and a lot of the work that we do behind the scenes is reactionary as a result of what's been going on. Is everything perfect? Absolutely not. And is there always work to do? Absolutely. But just to highlight, the past half hour, we heard about the great things that's happening in our schools and in our classrooms. So it's reinvigorating for me to hear it again. I'm happy the committee got to hear it. Hopefully there are people out there also watching, but there's some great things happening every single solitary day in our classrooms. We will get through COVID, we will get through the pandemic, and we're going to continue doing the great work that we do. And I'm thrilled to think about once we can free up all this COVID time and we can dedicate it towards academics and instruction and teaching and learning, how we're going to soar, which is very exciting. So thank you. All right, this is a perfect segue into handbook changes at the high school and the dress code.
Not as exciting as Cindy's shake box, which kind of cool. So we do have some handbook changes. They're mostly pretty nominal things. So just to kind of go over, do you have a copy of the document? Okay, so we did add a couple of additional protected classes to our harassment policy. They're highlighted in yellow. They weren't in there before. That was just to update to make sure that we are taking those steps with all the groups that require some support. The page 28, the credit amounts that students need for promotion to each grade, school committee actually approved those a few years ago. We just never put them in the handbook. They were in the program of studies, but they were never in the handbook. So this is just, we didn't change them. It's just putting them into there. Senior privilege was something new that, seniors had a privilege back in the day, a little bit before my time. We wanted to kind of give something there as an incentive for seniors to keep their grades up. So when they have intervention and they're all caught up, they can come in a half hour after everybody else. We just put that into the handbook. I will say there were some rough spots at first. And then after a couple weeks, seniors kind of figured it out. They need to be here by 7:44. And Mrs. Peck isn't having nearly as much trouble chasing down late students as she was before. So the dress code. The revisions here were an attempt to make it less gender biased. So a little bit of history on it. Fashions change. A few years ago, it was fashion for boys to wear pants in such a way that their boxers showed, which is to say their butt was hanging out. I was not a fan of this, and so I thought it was quite clever to come up with language that would specifically address that. I said that the bottom of a student's shirt had to reach the top of their pants. If you wanted to wear your pants down by your knees, that's cool. You just have to have a shirt that goes down to your knees too. And that worked pretty well with those boys. And the vast majority of dress code violations were kids trying to show everybody their brand of boxers. But again, styles have changed. And so fortunately, boys are not tending to do that anymore. But now styles have changed so that that clothing, as it's, that language as it's written, targets young ladies, where the style is now to wear shirts that don't quite reach the top of their pants. And so we took that out in recognition that if I did that, most of our students, their entire wardrobe would be a violation of our dress code. And that it was very much language that was targeting just the female students as styles changed. So it was meant to be that. The other kind of thing that we did, it still said in there, hats of any type. I'm not big on hoods. Mr. Vega and I disagree on that. We're trying it out, but we allow hats and hoods. And we also, I'm not sure what the oversized purses thing ever was. It's never been enforced while I was here, so I just took it out. It just seemed kind of weird. But the excessive torn and holey pants, again, the styles have changed, and parents now pay a lot of money to get their children pants with massive holes in them. It's style. I'm not known for my own fashion sense, but trying to accommodate that of students. So a lot of it was, we put in there the language too to focus on, we want to adhere to our core values, but at the same time, we don't want to have language that in any way is body shaming or is gender biased in the way that we do it. It's tough. I looked at a whole bunch of dress codes to come up with this, and it was never our intent to have that language that targets our female students in the styles right now. Fortunately, the boxer short thing seems to have gone into the Museum of Fashion History. So those were our changes.
Josh, you just want to briefly talk about, we've been high school principals have talked about, and assistant principals have talked about the dress code for 70, 80, 90 years. And you're right about fashion's changing. Can you just speak a little bit about when student dress disrupts the learning environment? So obviously, kids might wear a shirt, so just talk a little bit about, you can't cover everything, you can't keep up to date on all the fashion sense that are coming down the pike, but just talk a little bit about what happens when student dress disrupts the learning environment.
So, when how we manage the situation, or sort of
how you manage the situation, like for instance, if in here it doesn't say that you can wear just a bathing suit to school.
Yeah, we don't get into that sort of level of specificity. We try to keep it open, because if something does happen, if it's something with a drug message or a racist message or something like that, that's going. That's not going to be tolerated. If it's something that's more about are you really dressed in a manner that's conducive to school, usually we'll have a guidance counselor will talk to the student. If it's a male, Mr. Vega will talk to the student, and we try to just sort of make it a teaching moment about it. It's not about trying to shame somebody for it. It's more about just trying to get them to try to adhere to something that we would expect more for somebody who is going for a job interview. The standard that I used to try to use with kids is, if you were going to go to interview at CVS for a job, would they hire you if you're looking the way that you are? And I know that's also a fast and loose sort of rule, but we do try to make it more of a situation of that we're trying to make it a teaching moment, not we're sending you home. We're not suspending kids for that. We're not body shaming kids. We're not trying to, make it seem like we're questioning their morals and stuff. And I'm the last person to criticize anybody for bad style and fashion, but it's more about just trying to make it an environment where kids can dress comfortably at school and not worry about being body shamed, not worry about being targeted for their clothing. Is more what we try to go for.
I am just a little concerned about that, just because, just to try to make sure that it doesn't become a norm where, you know, if they're not going to get in trouble for wearing a bathing suit top as a shirt, you know, you may see that in your schools. And then I am worried that that could become, you know, there could become pressure for others that that's the in thing to do, you know, especially for young girls.
You've kind of hit on the challenge with it. If I can never make everybody happy with the dress code that I do. If I say, ladies, you're not showing your belly button, gentlemen, no sleeveless shirts, then I'm body shaming or I'm discriminating. It's very hard to make a policy that kind of addresses everybody's needs and wants. And I know that those are factors too, that the peer pressure that comes with it. Something like a bikini top type of thing, which, I mean, these things don't happen very often. It's very rare that a student's running around wearing something that, the more common thing is that they're wearing a shirt that has drug references on it. That's what most of our dress code violations come down to. And while it's typically the conversation, you know, as you bring in parents and you try to explain it to parents too, of what about the inappropriateness maybe of the clothing that the student's wearing, because of those very reasons. Because, you know, it's not that people are going to be so distracted that they can't possibly learn. That's not really kind of the problem. The problem is more of the body shaming that it can cause for other students. So, and that's kind of explained to them about how to make the most of it. It's a really tricky thing to go with. Any type of dress code, any action that I take makes somebody mad, no matter how I structure it. So I kind of went with the one that gives us sort of the most latitude and that doesn't deliberately, or not deliberately, but doesn't overtly indicate bias towards one gender or the other, or one culture or another, or one sexual identity or sexual orientation than another. So, but it's really tricky to kind of play something that gives some guidance that's going to make, you know, that's going to meet everybody's needs.
I just think it could be hard to police as well, you know, we're not able to be there where all the conversations are, you know, on the sports fields or in the hallways, and seeing how kids are interacting or speaking to each other. So I'm a little leery about it, you know. I have a 5th grader. What is she going to walk into the high school? What's the culture going to be like then? You know, that's my worry.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's, like I said, it's a really tough thing. It's probably, like, I would say the dress code is the thing that gets debated the most as we look at handbook changes, and, you know, we never make everybody happy, and we never cover every contingency either. So we try to make it so that it's you know, sort of a standard of reasonableness,
So, I mean,
as
do you
opposed to
see
fast and hard rules.
that in a couple of years, you know, it could be commonplace to walk in to see people in bathing suit tops, or, you know, minimal
No,
coverage?
we don't let
Okay.
kids come in bathing suit tops. You know,
Okay.
the style that kids kind of do now that we were running into problems with, if a student's running around in a bathing suit top, they're going to have a conversation with Jill and Kristen.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened, I should say. I guess it could happen. It doesn't happen. This is more the style. The style now is that shirts don't quite touch the top of pants for girls. Maybe that style changes in a couple of years. You know, you see it with prom dresses too. One year prom dresses are really short. One year they're so long that I bring a box of binder clips so they can kind of bunch them up in the back so that they can dance without falling. Yep. I like it better when this dresses are longer. My personal inclination is I'm rather conservative with how people dress. I'm trying to acknowledge that times do change. I go to the gym and I'm a little bit shocked at things that people wear now at the gym. Kids aren't wearing bathing suits, but it's more the acknowledgement. If I just have a rule that says shirts have to touch pants, it's being interpreted as being gender biased, or, you know, that I'm explicitly targeting women for the clothing that they wear at the school. So, but yeah, something extreme like a bathing suit top. We're not running into that, at least not yet. Well, hopefully we won't. We'll deal with it when it does come down.
Me ask?
All right, NEASC. So, NEASC is the accreditation process that high schools go through. Every 10 years, a team comes out, you do a big self-assessment, and then a team of educators from other schools come and they rate the school based on a set of standards that are meant to be universal for everybody. So it's not a matter of interpretation, it's a matter of this is what everybody thinks good curriculum looks like, good instruction looks like, good assessment. It gives you a common language to talk about school improvement. We had our 10-year, the decennial visit 4 years ago. So we had a progress report that we have, they get you kind of on doing these progress reports too, because the idea is they don't want it to be something that you do it and then nobody thinks about it for 10 years. They want it to be a process where you're continuously looking at what you're doing and making improvements and self-assessing on what you can do better. So for our 2-year report, there's 2-year reports, there's 5-year reports, there's special reports. For our 2-year report, we were supposed to specifically address professional development topics that we were doing. And I showed them the plan that we had done for professional development that included PD that we were doing for that common planning time, the protocols and things like that, data analysis procedures that we were using, the way that we were, student support topics that we were covering in our PD plan, and they commended us for it. They said it was great. So that letter, it was nice to get that letter and have, another step of the process done. Although I guess it just brings us closer to that big 10-year self-assessment. So our next target is our 5-year report is due February 2023. And there's a number of topics that we need to address in that one. Some of them have to do with funding for the schools. A lot of districts use NEASC as sort of a metric to give a community to say, we need to be funded at such a level to support these things. Specifically for us, the funding was to make sure that we're able to go through a curriculum revision cycle in a timely manner. So it's things like textbook support, other ancillary material support for our curriculum, and then capital projects that, a lot of towns end up with a wish list of capital projects. So it was the efforts, and what they were looking at there, because I asked them to clarify it, they're looking at what the school district is doing to advocate for that funding. How are we working with other town departments, other branches of the town government in order to do that? So how are we working with FinCom? How are we working with the Board of Selectmen to, and with the community at large to try to promote those? We also needed to look at building equity in our honors and AP courses, gender equity. Our AP and honors courses are dominated by female students, so they were looking for us to make ways to try to get more male students into those courses. Those are some of the major topics that they were looking at for us to do. And that'll be in our 5-year report, so I have to start getting people together to write that in the fall. And the cycle goes on.
Any questions about NEASC? It's a fun topic. Right. Thank you, Mr.
I
Romano.
love NEASC. Nobody else does. I do.
It's a good process. It's a good
I've shared a couple of
self-assessment.
visits. I really enjoy it, so. All right, thank you, folks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right, and finally, an update on superintendent's mid-cycle goal review. So I'm going to break this up into 2 parts. I had 4 goals that I presented earlier in the fall, and then we have the 4 standards that I am doing things on. So I'll go over the goals first, answer questions, and then go over the standards at the end. So the first goal that I had was through a comprehensive and team approach, the strategic actions identified by students, staff, community members, and the leadership team will be initiated and implemented throughout the school year. So this is basically the blueprint, that first goal, and I gave everyone an update on what we were doing for the blueprint at the last meeting. Just as an overview, we're covering things around academic excellence, community partnerships, the well-being of all, being a good local and global citizen, and the growth mindset. So, as I said 2 weeks ago, really happy with the work that everyone's done in the district, pre-K to 12, teachers, members of the leadership team, everyone, in working and implementing those strategic actions in the blueprint. The second goal that we had under instructional leadership stated that by June 2020, the leadership team and I will have prioritized student engagement fostering a safe learning environment, and clear objectives with purposeful instruction in the classroom observations. Feedback to staff for these observations will highlight one of these three items. So over the summer, what we did as a leadership team is we spent a lot of time talking about evaluation, good instruction, what the purposes of evaluation, and we spent some time going through a protocol to identify what do we as a leadership team value and think that's important inside a classroom. And we came up with those three things. Student engagement, we want to see kids engaged in their learning. 2, fostering that safe learning environment, not only physically safe, but emotionally safe, for kids to feel safe in. And the third thing was clear objectives with clear and purposeful instruction. So that's what we highlighted, and that's what principals, when they're doing their walkthroughs, are really looking for. As through some of our administrative meetings, we've done some tuning protocols, where we watched some videos and look for these things. And then the last thing I asked everyone to do is to provide feedback in the Ceij format. This is something that John Saffier brought to us probably about 30, 40 years ago, and it's a way to give feedback to staff that's constructive. So it stands for Claim, Evidence, Interpretation, and Judgment. We started this last year, and we implemented it, and we continue this year. So when staff's getting feedback, they're not just saying, you did a great job with that lesson. They're getting the claim, which is your great job with it lesson. They're getting the evidence to support why you did a great job with that lesson. They're getting an interpretation from the evaluator, and the evaluator is giving a judgment based off of that claim. If you're getting some constructive feedback, it's also good to say, here's what I didn't see, here's the evidence around it, and here's why you should be doing this for kids. So we spent a lot of time doing that this year, and principals are in classrooms doing that work. The third goal, I have to read, it says throughout the 21-22 school year, the district will prioritize and focus on the health, safety, and social emotional well-being of students and staff by offering programs, providing resources, and supporting the members of the Douglas schools in these areas. And again, that's all part of what we had in the blueprint. It's one of the areas we had, which is that social emotional well-being. I talked about it last week. You heard the principal speak about what's going on inside the classrooms. And the fourth goal was around family and community engagement. It says by the end of the 21-22 school year, we will increase our collaborative efforts with families to support student learning and development both at home and at school. Last week I mentioned that we had partnered with the Massachusetts Family and School Partnership Initiative. We have a final meeting next week. They're able to, in between our last two meetings, give us some feedback as to some areas that they've gleaned through interviewing parents, interviewing kids, doing some surveys that they feel we as a district need to work on. So I'll just touch on those briefly. We're going to, when we meet with them, dive a little bit deeper into them. But they feel, based off of their research and their time in the district, that we need to develop a vision for what parent and community engagement looks like. We talk about it, but do we have a clear vision? And can we articulate it, and can we share it with parents and with teachers? Next thing they said is we need to develop a strategy for how we can gather information from parents. We as a school, we as teachers, we as leaders know how we would like to engage with parents. The piece that's missing is we've never asked them how they want to engage with us and how they want us to engage with them. That piece is missing. So we're looking at developing a strategy, a survey, to send out to parents as to how we can engage with them and how they'd like to engage with us. A topic as old as the dress code is reworking parent-teacher conferences. It's been the same model for 50 years. It's been the same model for 50 years. And how can we do it differently? Are there different ways to do it? And again, there's some things we would need to do and some external forces that we'd have to work with. But how can we do parent-teacher conferences differently? One of the things some schools are doing is they're doing student-led conferences where it's the parent, the teacher, and the student comes in and presents to the teacher and the parent how they feel they're doing, you like that? How they feel they're doing, again, not maybe in first or second grade, but in the older grades, how they feel they're doing in the math class, the English class. So it's a student-led conference with the parent and the teacher providing feedback. I think things have changed in the past 20 years with email, with newsletters, with blogs, that 20 years ago, that parent-teacher conference was the only time really that a parent and a teacher could actually interact. With social media, with emails, parents know. Parents are always in communication, but we haven't changed our model. So they want us to look at that. Spending some time on professional development with staff. Obviously, if we're making a paradigm shift for involving families more inside classrooms, teachers need professional development around that. What does that look like? How can you foster it? How can you nurture it? What does it look like inside your classrooms? And the last thing was to develop district systems for support and tools for family partnerships. So what can we put in as a district and then share it with families as to what we're doing in schools and what resources are available to them as families, and to begin to explore that. So those were really the 5 highlights that they gave us. When we meet with them next week, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into them. We'll put together an action plan, and hopefully in February, March, I can present to the school committee what our action plan is. That's probably out of the 4 goals, the one that still hasn't taken off, but hopefully it will once we finish this work with the group. So those are my 4 goals for the year. If there are any, entertain questions on that now, and then I can dive into the 4 standards. People have them? Okay. So there were 4 standards. Standard 1 is instructional leadership, and the indicator that we talked about was the instructional indicator, which talks about student engagement, quality and effort of work, and meeting the diverse needs. What's been interesting as I did this activity is it seems like everything's aligned. The blueprint is aligned to the goals, which is aligned to the 4 strategies. The work that the principals have prioritized is in the blueprint, which is in our goals, which are in my goals, which are in the standards. So if you look at under the instructional leadership, under academic excellence, all the student engagement, quality and effort of work, meeting diverse needs, all falls under that blueprint of academic excellence and the work that we've done there. Our goal number 2 that we talked about in prioritizing what we're seeing inside classrooms with student engagement, with creating a safe learning environment, and with clear and purposeful objectives and instruction, speaks to those 3 pieces. We talked a little bit about the Ceij format and how we're giving feedback around those areas to staff. We've done some calibration videos. One thing we did earlier this year, it came out of the University of South Florida. It was called the ISEL standard, and it stands for Instruction, Curriculum, Environment, and Learner. So before you can focus in on the learner, you have to make sure you have solid instruction, you have to make sure you have solid curriculum, you have to make sure you have a solid environment. And we've done a lot of work around that. You've heard what the professional development we've done just last week with staff. We have people coming in and doing literacy work with us. So we're trying to give teachers tools to strengthen their instruction. Curriculum, we need to make sure teachers have resources inside the classroom, that they're current, that they're up to date. Through grant money last year and grant money this year, we're increasing the amount of textbooks that teachers have access to in grades pre-K to 5 in order to strengthen that curriculum for staff. In terms of environment, we want to create that safe, nurturing, supportive environment for our kids. Once you have those 3 things in place, you should see the learner succeed. So those are just some of the things we've done under the instructional leadership realm. In number 2, we had management and operations, and the indicator we focused in is environment. And under environment, you have plans, procedures, and routines, operational systems, social and emotional well-being, and student health and safety. So again, this ties back to the blueprint with the social emotional goal we have. Ties back to my 3rd goal, which is around SEL. This year, we didn't do it last year. We brought back our safety committee. We've already met twice. We've already had Alice drills that we haven't had in a couple of years as a result of COVID, just to make sure we have that protocol. As a result of that safety meeting and our Alice drill, we noticed a lot of staff wasn't wearing lanyards. And we started wearing lanyards just to be able to identify who the staff is in the building. And it was really interesting going through the drills when something happens and you have first responders respond, they don't know all of our teachers. They don't know who a staff member is. So if there's a crisis, you're going to see who's wearing a badge, and you're going to see who's not wearing a badge, and that's important. For kids, I know we saw a lot of this conversation happening at the primary school where teachers were telling kids, see how they have a badge on? You may not know who they are. Because they have that Douglas Public Schools ID, you know they're a safe person. So there's so many important reasons to wear those lanyards. And we're looking at our safety protocols, making sure they're current, making sure they're up to date, and making sure that we have access to them. We've offered a vaccination and booster clinic. We did one in December. We're doing another one the end of this month and in February. We had 125 people attend. So again, just putting those safety protocols in place. We've had a lot of PD and a lot of presentations to our kids around the SEL piece, and you heard from principals what we're doing around SEL. When it comes to plans, procedures, routines, that's just the inner workings of a school and how's it going. The principals do a fantastic job. Jeff Collette does a great job around making sure that things run smoothly. Are there kinks? Absolutely. But for the most part, we run very, very smoothly. The third goal is family and community engagement. We talked about the sharing responsibility indicator with student support and family support. Again, in the blueprint, we talked about community partnerships. The fourth goal that I had also speaks about building those and fostering those relationships between the school and the home. So really excited to see the work that we can implement in that goal. Again, that's probably one of the ones that we've done some work on, but not as rich as we have in the other three goals. And the standard 4 under professional culture was the managing conflict indicator, and it talked about response to disagreement and conflict resolution and consensus building. Well, anytime I talk anything about COVID, we're responding to disagreement and conflict, and we're building consensus. So a lot of the stuff we do around COVID speaks to this. Principals meet once a week with the union reps in their buildings to have conversations with them, and then they filter to me any issues that happen. Last year, I met once a month with DTA leadership. This year, I think we've met once or twice with the DTA leadership board, just to be in tune as to what's going on. I meet informally with the DTA president probably 2-3 times a month. Either I go to his classroom, we do it via email, we do it via text. So we're in tune as to what's going on. When something happens, he sends me an email or a text. I go by his room. We have those discussions. So we have those good open lines of communication. Every week, principals send me a weekly update with concerns and issues. And when they come to me, I then go and meet with the principals. Sometimes they're just FYIs. Sometimes they're things that need to be addressed. Every week, we meet with our food service director, our tech director, and our facilities director, just to make sure that everything is in tune. We meet Monday mornings at 9 o'clock, myself and Courtney. We meet every other week as a leadership team to do a lot of instructional stuff, but also we put topics on there that we need to discuss as an entire team that impact the entire district when it comes to how we're going to problem solve. And then, as all of us do as effective leaders, when problems come up, we address them and we solve them. As Josh said, you can't make everyone happy when you solve a problem, but what I find is that at least if you can explain your rationale behind it, and people can see it, they may not agree with you, but at least they know why you made the decision that you made. So those are the 4 standards and some of the evidence around the standards. I've been compiling evidence. I didn't want to flood the committee with 25 pieces of evidence for each of the standards, so I just kind of highlighted about a half dozen for each. And again, we've talked about it regularly throughout the school year. In looking at everything here, the one that I know we need to do more work on is that standard 3. Although we are doing things to engage the community and meet with them. You heard Cindy say she's going to do an interactive math night. We send out our newsletters, we send out our blogs. But I want to find a better way, not just for us to push out information, but how can we incorporate the community in. So I'm really excited, as I said, to start that work from that initiative we were part of.
I think this is all great. It shows that we have been able to do a lot of, or you, the schools, have been able to do a lot of mobilization this year. You know, at the beginning, I was thinking, you know, how much can we really start? this year before too much time has passed, but it was really amazing to see all of this, and, you know, I think a lot of things have been touched on. It sounds like there's a muscle happening in all of our areas that we prioritized, you know, at the beginning of the year, so I think this is a lot of great work.
Thank you. And it's all of us, myself, Courtney, the principals, the directors, the staff. I mean, staff had some input into creating that blueprint at the beginning of the year. Each of the principals did an activity. We took a lot of that information from them. We couldn't take everything, and we synthesized it into that blueprint. We, as part of our site councils, principals met with community members and got some input. We did it as a leadership team. So there was a lot of planning, a lot of input that went into it, and it was definitely a team approach.
Thank you for all the effort.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So yeah, I would just reiterate what Monique just said. I mean, when we put this together for your appraisal, which basically what this will become the superintendent's evaluation, we didn't know if we were going to be able to get to all 4 of the goals. And so I think as we go, yeah, we're not going to be fully, I think it'll be a continuation into next year.
Correct.
For our goal setting that we're going to do. But I'm very pleased with the progress we've made. Again, it goes back to you, your leadership, back to the principals, the staff, the administration, everybody coming together for one common goal, our kids in school. And so I'm very appreciative. So stating that, I know we need to do a little bit of housekeeping of figuring out when is the appropriate time for you to come back to us sometime in March timeframe, because we do have 2 open positions. So we want to finalize that report before our 2 board members go off. So if we could look at a calendar and what makes sense, I think that's probably something we should look at tonight. And understand, we probably are more than likely going to have to continuation, but we will do a cutoff date as of, and then probably for next year when we goal set again, we'll pick up where Dr. Vieira left off to go back through.
And just because I present the final findings in March, doesn't mean we stop doing this work.
No, then that's.
I know, but this is year-long.
Yes.
Work, and because we all value this, because we find this to be, because we know this is important, we invested time in it, it's not something that in May we'll say, we're done with SEL.
Right, no.
We're going to continue doing the work, and, you know, I think we talked about this early on when we did this, had our initial meeting in September, or late September, early October, that we all recognize the timeline, and given the fact that March marks, if we do this in March, it's basically the 75% mark of the school year, so we don't have the full year to do it. So obviously, we set lofty goals for a full year, but understanding that we're going to meet at that 3/4 mark to do the final project, which makes sense.
Does it have to be before election, or?
Yes, it has to be because they can't vote on it. So we have to have it done by.
Last meeting.
You know when the election is happening?
The first week in May.
Usually the first.
So,
So we're looking for March.
yes.
Where's town meeting first? Town meeting's first.
Town meeting's first, then, so it's the second week.
The 9th, 10th, or that.
More likely than not, we're probably going to have to add a meeting or 2 in March for the budget.
Yes.
So we already have the 2nd and the 16th scheduled. To give me an extra 2 weeks, would you like me to do my final presentation on the 16th? And I can get you everything probably by the 2nd. That'll give you 2 weeks to review it and then do the final evaluation on the 16th.
Is the election over by then?
Does that work?
Yeah. Too late.
Does that work? Well, I want to make sure you have enough time, so even if we did March 30th,
Okay.
I could take, because then I would send out and get everything back. Because the next one would be the 27th, the 27th is when we'd go final with your evaluation.
When's elections?
I think it's the 10th
10th of.
Of April?
of May.
Oh, okay, I thought it was April. Oh, okay. Okay,
Okay.
so then I was a month early.
So by April 27th, you're saying have the final evaluations done?
Yep, because I'll take all of your inputs, put together, we'll go back and forth.
So April, if we follow the April timeline, there's only one meeting in April because the 20th is school vacation week. So do you want to do the 6th and the 27th that month
Which month?
of April?
that works.
So the 6th would be the public meeting, the budget?
The 18th?
Something can't, you can't have that meeting. You can't have that extra.
Are we doing public meeting for public budget too?
You can't have that extra meeting on the
It's not
27th.
separate, right? It's the same one.
You never know, it happens a lot when we
Oh,
try to
okay.
have an extra meeting and for some reason we might not be able to, then it's too late.
Then we'll move it the day before. Yeah. So I'm sorry, we're having three different, what's the committee thinking in terms of a timeline?
So we just want to make sure, because I know it's going to get real hectic
Yeah.
real quick, because we have the budget too, we have to do the public
Correct.
comment for budget, so, what makes sense? Courtney, you've done this a number of times, so what makes sense?
Yeah, I was just a little bit concerned of the 27th date, just because if something happened, because that's an extra meeting date,
Yeah.
if something happened, you couldn't meet,
Then it wouldn't
then it's just
get
going to be
done.
too late.
Can we do the evaluation by the 6th? If we do the 16th for him to submit it?
If we do the March 16th, yeah.
That'll give 1, 2, 3 weeks to do the evaluation. March 16th and April 6th.
Is that a school committee night?
It is.
Yeah, so March 16th.
So I can present on the 16th, and then the final, then that'll give you 2 weeks to look at, or 3 weeks to
yeah.
look at all the materials, and then you could do the public portion of it on April 6th. Perfect.
Yeah, you don't want to, yeah, that's better.
All right, got it on the agenda.
Thank you.
We good, Courtney? Just want to make sure with everything.
Yeah, I was just a little
Yeah,
concerned
yeah.
about that.
I know, I just,
Yeah.
I know it gets crunch time, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and so we don't want to miss our window. So,
Yeah, that was my
thank
It makes
concern.
sense.
Yeah.
And that is it for my report tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're over to the school committee and subcommittee reports. We have an accounts payable report. For us to look at. Do we want to?
Wait, was I not here or not?
If you want, we can table this until
Yes.
either, that's absolutely fine.
So can we move that we'll table this one? Okay, now we're moving on to the consent agenda, the January 5th meeting minutes. We can look over. I'd be looking for a motion for the meeting minutes from January 5th.
I'll make a motion to approve the school committee meeting minutes of January 5th, 2022.
I second.
Motion made by Lisa, second by Monique. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, third reading of the JKAA Physical Restraint Policy Revision. Sorry, Tara, to keep you waiting so long. Right, so this is the third reading of a very long policy, but before I ask if you have any questions, I just want to point out an error under Section 4, Procedures for Use of Timeout as a Behavioral Support Strategy. Under Section C, there is an error for when principal approval is needed.
For timeouts, it says for timeouts more than 20 minutes. It should say for more than 30 minutes. So principal approval is needed for more than 20 minutes of a physical restraint, more than 30 minutes of an exclusionary timeout. So under C, that should say 30 minutes, not 20.
Okay.
Other than that section, I know this was a long policy. Were there other questions?
So the extended restraint, like on page 1, it says 20 minutes. That's not a timeout. Those are different things.
Different things,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
No questions? We need to make a motion for this one, right? So I need to make a motion for someone to approve the JKAA physical restraint policy revision?
So moved.
With the
As
amendment?
amended, yeah.
As amended,
As a-
sorry.
Thank you.
So moved.
BB.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa, second by Monique. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And the third reading of the JB Equal Education Opportunity Policy Revisions.
So this was just adding that paragraph 5 to the existing policy. During the first reading, we caught the typo of the lowercase k in the K-12 programs being evaluated, so that's been updated. Any questions on this policy?
I'd be looking for a motion to approve the JB policy revisions for the third reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa, seconded by Monique. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now over to School Business and Operations Managers Report.
Yes, I do not have any transfers or reclassifications this evening. And also, Raquel was not feeling well, the food service director, so she won't be able to do the school lunch program update, so we'll definitely have that on for next time. She did prepare a wonderful presentation. I definitely want her feeling well so she can shine and present all the wonderful things she's been doing, so we'll definitely put that on the next meeting. So the last thing I have is, before the holidays, I did present to you the general fund report, the preschool program historical trend, the school lunch program historical trend, and the circuit breaker and school lunch, the detailed historical trend. And I did say that at this meeting, I would present to you the funds report of revolving funds, donations and grants. This is basically the same as what we present at the end of a year end. As well. So on the first page, we have the revolving funds, and this is on a cash basis through December 31st, 2021. So it's not projecting through the end of the year, it's just where we are at this moment in time. Let's see. So school, if you look at that, just a couple things I want to outline is particularly for circuit breaker and school choice, we haven't obviously received all the revenues. We do expect to receive approximately $733,000 or more in school choice. You can see what we've already received to date there. In revenue, we are expecting per DESE in circuit breaker, $1,215,663. We received roughly half so far. Okay, you will see also in some of these, and particularly the circuit breaker program, we do the encumbrances for what we expect to spend for the entire year, and that is sped tuitions, okay? But again, that's just where we are at this point in time. Let's see if there's anything else to point out there. Nothing much there. The school lunch is doing very well. Typically, if I did a report like this, it would be way in the red, so I don't think in 26 years, I don't think I've ever seen this, so. The free lunch is doing us some good. Never mind, the carryover balance helped as well, because I tried to set it up well. Then we just have a couple of small donation categories, miscellaneous donations. We used to have, a number more, but we have been trying to spend all those down because some had been there for several years. So we just have roughly over 6,000 in miscellaneous donations, and then we have athletic donations for the high school as well, which we'll hope to spend before the end of this year. On the next page, this is all the grants. We have the prior year grants, meaning any grants that we received in FY '21 or before, because some grants, particularly where they've changed the title grants as well, they can carry over for up to 3 years at times. As you can see, most of them have been spent, of the prior year grants, with the exception of the first one. That is our middle school career exploration grant. That was a STEM grant that we received. We were getting an allotment, quite a hefty allotment for each year, but because of COVID, unfortunately, we really couldn't spend any money at all last year because it's all hands-on. So, which is pretty sad. So Bob, I did bring this to Bob's attention right when he started this year. So he's been taking a look at that, and they've been expending the funds. You cannot use it for staff, but it is for all the materials, and as you know, with the STEM program, that can be pretty expensive in a wide variety of materials that they can purchase. So they're definitely making good use of that, and I know that program is definitely running very well this year, where last year, it was difficult. And they did allow for an extension on that to go in as well because of that. So, and we do have that in writing. So most of the rest have been spent. For FY '22, the current year grants, the first one is the Rural Aid Grant. We received that fairly recently. And the full amount of the grant is $37,103.74. Paul and I have had several meetings and have had some discussions with administrators internally. We're still trying to figure out the best way to utilize those funds. They must be spent by June 30th, but certainly, as some of the discussions we've had, say for instance, they needed iPads at the primary school or something. We could certainly purchase those this year with those funds, and that will alleviate, because they're already planning on putting that in the FY '23 budget. And we don't know if it could actually stay there, given our appropriation in additional revolving funds. So that's one of the thoughts. We also had some other thoughts as well. But that's still kind of up in the air what we're doing with that. We have a little bit of time, but we do have to move pretty soon to expend it before June 30th. Let's see. It's hard for me to read without my glasses, but I can't put them on either. So the school lunch program, they've received a few grants. Some of them we just got, like the EBT grant. They just sent us the funds. We've already spent those. And Raquel has done a really good job of applying through Project Bread and some other state grants. And she is waiting for, confirmation on some. But it's mostly for equipment in all of our schools, which she's been doing a great job. Where this school, actually, I thought the school was a lot younger, but I looked at the plaque out there and it said 2003. And 23 is just around the corner. So I don't know where all that time went. But, some of this equipment is really aging. So she's doing a fantastic job acquiring some funds to purchase equipment and small wares and things of that nature. She'll go over a lot more in detail when she does her presentation for you. The Sr3 Grant. Now, we did apply for the Sr3 Grant. Certainly when it came out. And we came up with, Cindy and Paul and I met, we did come up with the best idea at that time of the expenditure of it, knowing full well that with all probability, we would need to do an amendment. We want to make the best use of the funds, obviously, and there's so much money that's been coming in. We haven't been doing much with this grant yet. It can go into the next year. So we're still, in fact, we're going to be meeting tomorrow for at least an hour and a half just to talk about grants and get updated and think about, how to best use these funds. We're already halfway through the year, so it may be that a good chunk of this money may be utilized possibly in FY '23. So that's just kind of conversation. It actually goes, the duration of the grant is to 9/30/24 that you're allowed to use the funds for. So it has such a long duration. We want to make sure that we have the best value added for the funds that we've been given. There's a lot of flexibility with regard to this grant. This isn't a fully all COVID grant, and certainly we could utilize it possibly in the summertime if need be, for some remediation or things of that nature. So that's all still out in the open, still to be determined. And there's no problem doing an amendment either for these grants at all. Let's see. So we have a couple of new ones on the FY22 American Rescue Plan, IDEA. That's a new one that Tara had applied for, $63,383. That is for special ed professional development and educational instructional supplies, which is really good. And also we have another new one, the IDEA ARP, that 264 grant. That was a good amount as well, and that's for professional development, which is really excellent because special ed hasn't been able to have the opportunity to have probably as much special ed, professional development as we'd like to have. So again, to Paul, talking about all the wonderful professional development we've had, some of it is that as well, for special ed particularly. And the rest of the grants there until the very bottom, what I'll get to in a second, is all our typical grants, the Title I, the Title IV, special ed, the 240 grant, the 262 grant. Those are grants that we've been receiving for many years, that we do receive every single year. The one at the bottom, that's a Project Lead the Way, that's the one for the high school, $24,000, and that is for their engineering program. It can only be spent on their engineering program. So that's being utilized as well. So I didn't know if anybody had any particular questions that I can try to answer on the...
How are we, this negative 66,000?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yep, I forgot to mention that. Yep, I knew that was going to come up. The 161, no, yeah, the 161. That is IDEA. That's because we're encumbering everything. We want to know, because again, that's for sped tuitions, just like circuit breaker. So we encumber everything right to the end of the year. It's not being spent yet, but we are encumbering it. But the amount of the grant is we are going to receive the full amount of the grant. That's
I'm
an
looking at
an absolute.
the bottom total, that's negative 66?
Yeah, that's because, right, that's because
that
of
gonna
that.
be- that's
That's
gonna-
because of that 161 there.
Right, I understand
Yeah,
that. Is that gonna be brought up to zero?
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm encumbering in that encumbrance column, see that 185 in the negative? The encumbrances there for the 240 grant? That's because I'm encumbering all the tuition, because we do have signed contracts for these tuitions. So we must encumber that liability. So I have the full liability in there through June 30th. But we receive the funds all throughout the year. In other words, we have not spent that 185. It's just an encumbrance. Yes, of course, at the end of the year, it'll be in the black. Yeah, yep.
That's all I wanted to
Yeah, yep. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Any topics not anticipated?
There are not.
We are going to do an executive session this evening. So and we will not return to regular school committee. We will adjourn from that, but we need to do a roll call vote to go into roll call vote to exit out of our regular session to go into the executive session. I need a motion to. You want me to read it? Yeah. So we're going to executive session to discuss the strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, and if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the government body, and to conduct collective bargaining, to review the contract language and propose revision strategies for a successful completion of an agreement between the Douglas School Committee and the Douglas Teachers Association Teachers Contract.
So moved at 8:48.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa, second by Monique. All those in favor? Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.